Hi, I'm Mark Unger, producer of Roundtable. Because we find this presentation so special, we really would like for you to see this. Please watch.
Good evening. Welcome to Single Shot at Roundtable with Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Tonight we have an excellent artist of many medias, Barbara Schaefer. We're here tonight to talk about her photography, which in my personal opinion have a very specific and interesting air of enigma attached to it. It has this ghostly feeling. Basically, when you look at it, you either see spirit in it or expect the spirit to be right around the corner. So is my impression correct? That's what was originally intended with your works, to create this feeling?
Well, it began in when I was in Rome. I lived in Rome for many years and go back and forth now. Now I live in New York. So I was invited to participate in an exhibition for the Shoah, the Holocaust, and so my premise of the work that I was contributing, I went to the Jewish ghetto of Rome, and my sense is that the spirit returns to the place it has known to make sense of its experience, and on some strange level to find its body. So that was kind of how it began in the Jewish ghetto of Rome.
In Italy?
In Italy, yes.
I remember you was mentioning before that Italy in general had a huge impact on your artistic pursuit and general approach to art creation and visual art and everything, basically.
Definitely, definitely.
So
yeah, I lived there for 12 years, and it's an amazing place, and it just seeps into your consciousness and your way of perceiving things.
In what way?
It comes sort of around the corner in the sense that when you're living with such beauty and so much art, that it becomes a part of you. I mean, not like a tourist and you go and you admire it, but it becomes your point of reference. For example, I lived in Monti, which is the first neighborhood of Rome, and I had a car, and I would drive on Via Foro Imperiale, and then I would see the Colosseum as I turned left to go toward my home. So
that's basically a road mark, right?
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
That's definitely an inspiring moment.
Yeah.
Well, here in New York we also have a lot that goes on in terms of art, and a lot of beautiful art artifacts surrounding us as well, but Italy definitely have its special place in the artistic world. So about those photographs from Italy, so you was trying to create a feeling of omnipresence, trying to basically pull these memories from the stones and make them to be physical and tangible.
Well, I wasn't trying to create anything. I sort of let it come from itself, rather than me try to impose upon it. And so a lot of the work, or most of the work that I do, is like theater improvisation in a way, that I select a location, and then whoever I'm working with, I have them move in their own way in that location. And I work without lights, and so just a flashlight. So as they move, I capture glimpses of them, and so whatever happens is surprising. I'm never sure what's going to happen.
the element of surprise. It's indeed visible just as well as spontaneous and improvisation. It really sounds like a short story in a way, something you overhear when you're passing by the street, and it sticks to your mind. And they're really memorable. I always was wondering how you're achieving to make an image to be so memorable, even though it's showing something logically very plain.
Well, it's called painting with light. So, in a way,
Indeed it is.
yeah. But I allow it to happen rather than make it happen. You know, it just also because I, you know, work on a tripod and long exposure. So whatever happens, you know, happens within 30 seconds or more. So.
So it's
Yeah.
all long exposures.
Yeah.
Well, then I also very fond of this technique, and for me, the biggest importance of it, it's basically a still version of a movie in a way. You're not recording just one instance, but you're recording a series of instances in one shot. And
That's true.
definitely is very underlining property of what I've seen of your works. It's very dynamic. You can sense that it's not just one still moment, it's a process which is recorded. Yeah.
Well, it's like poetry in a way, is it? Yeah.
Poetry it is,
Yeah.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I had a thought now.
Absolutely. Improvise.
Improvise, yes. Well, that's exactly what I do, and you know, it's an intuitive kind of improvisation. Well, improvisation is intuitive, and whoever I'm working with, this is important. This is whoever I'm working with, whatever they bring, shows up in the work. And before I work with anyone, I usually have a conversation with them if I haven't seen them in a while, and I ask them where they're at, what's going on at this moment of their lives, and it always shows up in the photographs. You'll see. For example, in one of these photographs that you will see, the woman who I photographed she was just recuperating from a nervous breakdown. And she was so as she moved, you know, there's a tentativeness in her movement. So it's as like she's hovering and wanting to, not sure which way to go. So I called it the next step, because I think we all sort of are looking for that next step.
Absolutely, all our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, where do we go next? How do we move, you know?
Wow. Actually, when you started to talk about poetry and we went into the pre-context of the photographs, you reminded me of the way Japanese poetry is organized. Because of such a short format, it often have a lot of pretext which people actually have to know in order to understand it. Just to give you an instance, there is this famous tango. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to preserve the rhyme and the meter in translation, but essentially it sounds like, "Oh, my little catcher of the dragonflies, how far you ran away today." And it's actually written by the mother who just lost her son. So that actually reminded me of what you were saying about photograph with pretext, basically individuality of the model being revealed in it. And I know that you're very accomplished painter as well. How for you photography compares to painting? How
does it compare?
How does it? In what way it feels differently for you? Because I'm pretty sure it does, right?
It does and it doesn't. It's just a different entrance and exit into it. When I first started painting, well, not when I first started painting, but I also danced, and you know, so I took many years hiatus I started with printmaking, then I took a hiatus with dance and choreography and theater, and then when I was living in Rome, I went back to the visual. So it's really all about movement and all of it. So with photography, you can see that there's movement in it. It's really important for me. Also, in the photography, those images are like hidden aspects of ourselves, like a conversation, like what's below the what's beneath the conversation. You know, what is not being said.
What is not being said. It's
yes.
a very nice name for your next series, I would imagine.
So, really and I don't even know what's not being said, but it shows itself. You know, it's just like, you know, when you're reading a book.
Purely intuitive level, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. We'll be back in a few seconds, and we'll get back to one question I always wanted to ask you.
Okay.
And we're back after this break, and the question I wanted to ask you, let me make a long introduction first. I do believe that what you do in photographically in terms of methodology is actually the direction which photography will be taking in the future. And the reason why, your very masterful, very interesting and memorable shots in many ways define what is expected from photography you would see on the wall of the gallery. A lot of the time it have focus to be either secondary or non-existent at all. A lot of the times the composition is completely different from what you regularly expect from a photographer, and you making it to work as a whole. You consciously was going into this direction, or it's just reflecting your general vision?
No, it wasn't conscious. I never was interested in photography. It was, I mean, I appreciated it, but I was never personally thinking I would ever use photography as my process. But it kind of evolved on its own. One interesting thing that happened around 2002, 2003, I was living here in New York, and I got an email from Italy, in Italian, by a person I didn't know, and it said, "You're as beautiful as your work, and I'd like to get to know you, but I don't have courage." So, so I was about to delete the email, and I said, "No, wait a minute. This is a piece of work in itself." So I wrote back to this person, this man, whose email address was "You're il tuo principe at Art Italy. So you're Prince.
Prince of Italy? Prince of Art of Italy?
You're Prince. So I wrote back, and so began a 5-month conversation, virtual conversation with an unknown person. I didn't know his name. But anyway, so all these we told each other things that you tell someone intimately. And so it began a dialogue back and forth, and he'd send me images, and I'd send him images. So when it ended, I said, why am I rejecting technology? Because at that point in my life, I was thinking, no, just painting, just real, tactile things, not technology. I said, why am I rejecting it? So it kind of came into my work, and actually my paintings became incorporated with photographs. So that's how at first I started using photography. Then a friend of mine who's a photographer in Rome did this technique of painting with light. He told me how to do it, and I started experimenting with it.
Yeah.
And
it's actually extremely incredible. Most of the time mixed media involving photography is coming after, when the person already was working with photography for a while, but for you it actually was the entry to photographic world. So it's really interesting.
the opposite of
So you wasn't consciously trying to defy the standard rules, it just happened to be part of your personality, just being above all the rules by definition, right?
Right, yeah.
This is perfect.
I don't like the rules. It's not that I don't like them. I just, try not to be defined by the rules.
Just too narrow, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's actually great. We really need this in our art world, not to define the rules first and then try to follow them, but to actually understand where we want to get and see if those rules will allow us or will actually prevent us from it.
Well, I think a big part for me is, feeling, the sensation of whatever it is. Because I think so much of our world is disconnected from movement, from the body, from our feeling sense of being alive. So for me, it's not to say that it doesn't have an intellectual component. I think that's always there. But when I go into anything I'm doing, I understand it later. I go into it with an intuitive sense, and then after I've done a series, then I understand it.
So the art is not only the result of reflection on the world, but also a mean and a tool of reflection on the world for you.
The what?
A tool.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's actually a great thing to have, and it definitely reflects on the quality of work, because again, your work is very dynamic, and if it's a process of reflection on the world, it definitely would show, and actually showing it as a process, not just a still instance.
Well, it's integrated with the world, right? Rather than...
Well, everything is integrated,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But some people come at it in a very intellectual level. Like conceptual can be, you start with the thinking mind rather than the physicality of it.
Well, often we work on a phenomenon of artists either being able to create art that well or being able to talk about his art that well. It's very rare it would be both of those things put together.
Right.
Well, it also happens, but it definitely the most important part is being able to create these beautiful things, making this world a better place. So, do you see any specific purpose in what you create, or it's just something you just basically need to do to breathe? I'm often asking artists about it, and it's about 50% of responses actually something definite they're trying to achieve and some goal they have in mind, and 50% of the time it's just basically I'm doing art because I can do it, cannot not do art.
I think it's more of a practice. You know, just like showing up for it, like meditation in a way you say.
Spiritual practice.
Yeah, it's a practice. It you know, gives meaning to the everyday, to, you know.
And how art changed you then? If it is a practice, it probably have some ways in which it modified the person practicing.
Well, I've been practicing art since I was a little girl, so in some ways I don't think of it as that it comes from the outside. It just, you know, comes from the inside, and it just creates more awareness of space and time and form and formlessness, and well, there is one thing though. There is, you said, I also write.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my first discipline, but I have written a book that eventually I hope to publish. It's a memoir, and it's actually the second book I've written. And as I can definitely feel an improvement in the writing. I mean, I see the evolution of the practice. And of course, with anything you do again and again, you see the evolution of it as you stand back. You have to stand back, though, right, to see
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
And you have to participate in this dynamism in order to create a future practice. And we're back, and since we have only a couple of minutes left, usually we're asking our guests to share a piece of their knowledge about what they do the best, or what they particularly interested in photography. And in case of Barbara, it definitely is nighttime photography, long exposure photography, and light painting. So if I would ask you what is the most important thing a photographer needs to know about doing any of those things, or maybe all three of them, what would you say?
Well, practically, you need a tripod. Otherwise, you're just going to get blurry images. And you need a flashlight.
The flashlight.
The flashlight. And pick an environment that with a certain parameter that is inspiring, that you feel curious about, and see what happens. And there's two, and for me there's two ways, well there's more than two ways, but is that if you're working with someone, let them move on their own, and rather than
Basically
you
not
directing
direct
them. I mean, you can. I mean, that's another way. I mean, and there's moments when I do direct, but for the most part, you know. And of course, this is my way. It's, you know,
Absolutely,
whoever
yeah.
is going to do it is going to find their way to do it. So just allow, you know, but if you are working with someone, you know, let them direct you as well as you direct them. And you can also work with the space. You don't have to work with the person.
In what way? That actually sounds extremely interesting. I can't imagine what you're talking about.
Well, I did a series called In Treatment. It was after the TV show In Treatment, you know, an HBO series about a therapist and his patients. And I had, I didn't have a model, so I had taken photographs from the TV and I installed them around my loft. And so I didn't have a model except for myself. So I just moved around the space as though it was a living being. So you can work that way too.
That's actually a very interesting approach. I don't think I ever heard of anybody doing it. Well, thank you very much, Barbara, for joining us today. It was
Thank you.
really great, and thank you for this advice. Maybe next weekend I will try to do some light painting myself based on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you found that worth watching as much as I did. I'm Mark Unger for Roundtable. Thanks for watching.